Hi guys, Miss Francis here. Today I'd like to talk to you about neurotransmitters and what happens when an action potential reaches the end of the neuron. And then I'd like to finish up our discussion talking about reflex arcs. So what happens when an action potential reaches the end of the neuron? Where does that action potential go? Well, we know it has to travel to a neighboring neuron, but how does it do that? It's going to involve these chemicals, which are chemical messengers called neurotransmitters. And what these neurotransmitters do is they're going to dock on a receptor on the what's called postsynaptic membrane, which is going to open up a sodium-gated channel, allowing sodium to enter the postsynaptic nerve, thus sending the action potential on through the next neuron. So let me show you what I mean. If we take a look at this picture, you'll see that we've got the presynaptic cell, which is where the message derives from, and the postsynaptic cell, which is where the message gets sent. So the first step involves calcium, actually. So as my message travels down the neuron, it becomes depolarized. And what that does is it signals to the calcium channels that they need to open and allow calcium to flood inside my presynaptic membrane. That then signals vesicles that contain neurotransmitters to move towards the presynaptic membrane, fuse with it, and release the neurotransmitters. What those neurotransmitters do is they travel through the synaptic cleft, which is also known as the synapse, and it's going to bind to our receptor site, which in this case is a ligand-gated channel. And what it's going to allow is sodium to move in to our postsynaptic membrane. So this is neuron 1. This is like the terminal branch of neuron 1, and then this would be a dendrite on neuron 2. So let me show you a little bit more in detail what happens at the postsynaptic membrane. So you've got your neurotransmitters that are going to travel across the synapse. That neurotransmitter itself isn't what travels through that ligand-gated ion channel. What travels through is going to be your potassium as well as, your sodium as well as your potassium. What that does is it enables the depolarization of that postsynaptic neuron. Now the sodium has gone through and my neurotransmitter is released from the receptor. So what happens now to those neurotransmitters? Well, that neurotransmitter can travel back through the synaptic cleft and return to the presynaptic membrane, or it can be digested by digestive enzymes. So now let's move on to the reflex arc. Let's answer some questions. Here we go. The space between the terminal axon branch and the dendrite of the postsynaptic cell is called the synapse. Neurotransmitters are found in the vesicles. Those act as your chemical transmitters or your chemical messengers. The entrance of calcium is what signals the vesicles to fuse with the presynaptic membrane, which then releases those neurotransmitters into the synapse. Well, how do those calcium channels know to open? It's because of the depolarization of that presynaptic membrane, which is caused by an arriving action potential. The calcium channels are voltage gated, so when that part of the axon becomes depolarized, obviously the voltage changes. That is what signals the opening of it. Once in the synapse, the neurotransmitters bond with the receptors that are embedded in the postsynaptic membrane. And then the neurotransmitters can be destroyed by enzymes or be taken back into the presynaptic neuron by active transport. It's also known as reuptake. So now what I want to do is explore a reflex arc. A reflex arc is quick. It is an innate behavior, meaning it's not something that's learned. For example, when you go to the doctor and he takes that hammer and he hits your knee with it, your reflexes cause your foot to move. Now, how do these reflex arcs work? Well, they involve a small number of neurons when we compare it to an action potential that travels through many neurons. So a reflex arc involves a sensory neuron, an interneuron, and a motor neuron. So a small amount of neurons are involved in a reflex arc. And why would that be? It's because we need our reaction to occur quickly. Furthermore, our brain is not going to be involved in this reflex arc. Instead, it's going to involve our spinal cord. So that ends our discussion of the neuron, of neurotransmitters, of the reflex arc, and our next discussion will revolve around osmoregulation.